Hey everybody, it's Jake here from Old Town Yoga in Fort Collins, Colorado. This is teacher training weekend, and River is upstairs with the group doing some lecture or something. I'm not really sure what they're up to, but I thought we would sneak up there and just kind of check out what's going on. So let's go and see what's up. Okay, just walking through the studio.
Managing that relationship. So what the lumbosacral rhythm is, or the pelvic lumbar rhythm is you have to control the contracting of the muscles. Contraction, extension. Right? Yeah, it's the degree, just as a review, it's the degree to which the pelvis rotates forward and the sequence in which the pelvis rotates forward, combined with the degree of lumbar spine flattening and or reversal, as well as, again, the sequence of when the lumbosacral spine flattens or reverses. Sort of the sequence of the relationship of those two movements together. That's the pelvic lumbar rhythm or lumbosacral rhythm. Okay? This is a review. And how is that managed? Do you remember from your reading what the key is to managing this relationship in forward bending?
Abdominal contraction?
Yes, abdominal contraction initiated through the breath. Okay? So the breath is a key component to healthy movement patterns into and out of forward bending. And you remember we talked about, we just mentioned briefly what part of the breath you do the movement on. So you move into a forward bend on what part of the breath typically? Exhale, right. And where is the origin of the exhale? Where does the exhale initiate in your body? In the abdomen. Convenient, right? So convenient for forward bending. How does that happen? I love that. So the place where you're moving your awareness and then beginning your breath is proximal to the area that you need to modulate for correct mechanics of moving into your forward bend. Very convenient that way. Okay? So we're going to be looking at that. I'm going to have you do some exploration of that. So the idea is that, just to get the idea in your head before we do it in your bodies, the idea is that the awareness goes to the breath. The breath begins with an inward movement of the lower abdominal, and that movement progresses from the pubic bone here, the top of the pelvis in the front, progresses from the pubic bone gradually up past the navel all the way up to the xiphoid process and lower ribs in the front. So that's the movement of the exhalation. That's review. But as you're bending forward, what you're doing is attention to breath. The breath begins in the pubic bone area, the insertion there. And as you're exhaling, the muscles come up and in, and the low back gradually lengthens as simultaneously the pelvis rotates forward at the hip joint. So it's a initiating with the support of the abdominals, and then a vertebra by vertebra rounding of the low back as the pelvis slowly rotates forward. So actually, to get the coordination of all these things requires, at the start, a lot of attention. Okay, so if your brains are feeling at all fatigued from working this way, that will change over time. Your brains will be less fatigued, your body memory, your muscle memory will kick in, and it will become easier for you. But initially it requires a lot of steady attention and articulation of this area of the body. So we'll work with that small movement. But does that make sense to you just in general? Mm-hmm. Okay. That's for moving into a forward bend. When we move out of the forward bend, we come out of a forward bend generally on what part of the breath? Inhale. Okay? Inhale is centered in the chest. So inhale is going to facilitate lifting of the sternum, expansion of the ribs, and flattening of the thoracic spine, as well as the cervical spine as it follows. So as you're inhaling out of the forward bend, what happens is the breath starts here, and then you inhale until the spine is roughly flat. And at that point, then you begin to rotate from the pelvis to come back up, flat back. Okay, so you come up until the back is flat, and then you initiate movement from the joint to movement. Well, here's the magic of the whole thing, is that because the inhale starts here, you're still contracted here till almost the very end. So as the inhalation proceeds, at the beginning of the inhale, the whole abdominal wall is firm, engaged, and is supporting the lumbar spine. As you inhale, you're releasing from the top down. So it's not until you're like 3/4 of the way out that you even get past the navel, and then you release. So that by the end of the inhalation, this is very important for health of the pelvic region and responsiveness of the abdominal and pelvic muscles. It's important that you actually relax here by the very end of the inhale. So you're not looking at like tighty-whitey American, suck it in, hold it up at all times. It's the responsiveness of engaging the abdominals and then releasing them that creates health and circulation and flow and connection. But yes, as you're coming out of your forward bend, this part doesn't release until towards the very end, which is really, it's very, very tough in terms of agonist-antagonist relationship. I'm going to divide this up further and say, I'll do this in a sec actually. So let's go now to the release valve. You guys remember that term, release valve? Just, some of you are nodding, some of you are zoning. So those of you who are on the same page as me, how would you say that just in lay terms? How would you describe what a release valve is?
What you do to avoid the target movement. Like, say, you don't stretch or lengthen the lower back muscles. So you could get into certain ways of positioning your body to avoid doing that.
Yeah, to avoid the, how would you describe the stretching of the muscles?
Avoid to avoid doing the sacro-lumbar rhythm,
which is primary intention.
Yes, that's
Yes.
the primary intention.
Right, so considering that you're clear on what the intention of the posture is, it's sort of a way that, it's an avoidance mechanism, sort of a way that your body doesn't quite accomplish the intention of the posture. And it's important to say that avoidance has a kind of a negative connotation. It's not necessarily intentional. But what happens over time is, you bend over a lot. There's less patterning around the more unusual directions of movement. But something that you do as often as bending forward, your body has a series of instructions that is just a unit that happens in your nervous system, where it's like bend forward and a whole series of a chain of actions is set into play. It's like pressing play on a preset program of how your body accomplishes that, what muscle contracts, what muscle relaxes, in what sequence. And over time, this becomes habitual. Your body just creates these patterns. And sometimes those patterns are very functional and helpful for the structure, and sometimes those patterns aren't. They're based on other things, like maybe an injury that you've had, or just a kind of awareness, or even if your parents had a certain way of moving that you emulate. You tend to, walk like your parents do, or talk, it's where accents come from. You have a lot of habituated patterns, and some of them are useful, some not so much. There are other reasons for this patterning as well. A big one in the yoga community is that you've been taught to move in a certain way. So when you go to your yoga class, you've been taught to move into a forward bend in a certain way. And some of those instructions are based on sound anatomical knowledge, and some of those are based on helpful movement patterns. And some of the instructions that are out there are not. And then beyond that, there's your understanding. Maybe the instructor guided it properly, and you just heard something different, or you integrated something, did something different in your body when you heard those instructions. So there are many reasons why we can have these release valves. Another big category is actual physical limitations. So if your joints actually just don't want to move that way, again, for whatever reason. Could be just anatomically that's sort of how you're put together. Could be something genetic, could be a movement pattern or habit pattern that has created change in the mobility or created change in the musculature. Injury, ligaments, just asymmetry. It can be related to activities that you do. If you're a golfer, you're constantly twisting and you're swinging one way. Same if you work with like lawn work and stuff, it's a raking action, for example, you usually have a dominant side. If you have babies and you're carrying a baby on one hip, your body starts to shift to that. And that will affect not only your posture when you're at rest, but as well how you move into and out of things. And so these are release valves. They're ways that your body negotiates the request that you're making of it. Like, I got to get to that shoe to tie in. So how is your body going to negotiate that request? How is your body going to navigate into and out of that position? So those are release valves. And from your reading, well, you're already So from your reading, do you remember what some of the common release valves are for that? Ways that bodies typically avoid the purpose?